Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Oran Kivity. He is an acupuncturist, coach, and author, and he's joining us live from Taiwan. Welcome to the show, Oran.
Thank you. Yeah, good morning to you.
Good morning to you, to Oran, and from India. So I'm sure not we'll be talking about a lot of stuff on the art of acupuncture with you, and I'm sure a lot of people will benefit from this all around the world. So my first question to you, Oran, is to understand a bit more about you, about your journey, so that the audience knows exactly who they are listening to.
Okay, so I'm a British acupuncturist, and I first trained in acupuncture in the UK, graduating in 1987, which is a while ago now. And initially, I started a London practice, and then I went to study in China a couple of times. And I got involved in publication work, working with a book on TCM, traditional Chinese medicine. And then in about 10 years later, I've been working in London for 10 years, I came across some teachers of Japanese acupuncture. And I got very excited by Japanese acupuncture, and I converted, if you like, or retrained into Japanese methods. And since then, I've been living in Asia, first of all in Malaysia, and more recently in Taiwan. And I've been practicing and writing and teaching ever since.
Right, Oran. Now, to understand acupuncture, everyone at one point in time have heard about acupuncture, and they know that this is something very traditional sort of a thing. But many people just have an impression that it's all about needles. Put some needle here, put some needle there, and that is how it is. Is it all acupuncture that is all about? How would you explain the true meaning of acupuncture to people who need it but do not know beyond this? And that's why they are not able to make the full use of this particular thing that is available to them.
Okay, I think first of all, people need to understand what acupuncture does before they understand how we do it. And the goal of acupuncture is very simple. It's to regulate the body. So what I often say to patients is that acupuncture doesn't cure anything. And they go, gosh, what do you mean? What do you mean it doesn't cure anything? And then I say, instead, what it does is it teaches your body to cure itself. So AJ, if you go around and visit a close friend or a relative, and you go to the door and you ring on the doorbell, what you're doing is you're sending information from the outside of the house to the inside of the house. And the doorbell rings, someone inside the house hears what you're saying, hears the doorbell, and they come walking to open the door. So it might be a teenager who comes bounding down the stairs and runs down and opens the door. It might be a very old lady who kind of walks very slowly to open the door. But either way, we can't say that it was the doorbell that opened the door. All it did is it sent information from the outside to the inside, which then led to change. And that's what we're doing with acupuncture. So we're working on the outside of the body. We're working on the skin, and sometimes we work with needles, but there are many other ways in which we can send this signal from the outside to the inside to regulate and to inform the body what it's supposed to do.
Right. So why needles? Why it is not something else? Means you can tap, you can do anything, but why needles? And should people be afraid of such needles? Because the name of needle or the whole idea of needle can scare a lot of things. It does scare a lot of things. And especially if they are not aware of the type of, type of education or the skill the person acupuncturist has. Many a times they may think the person does not have that sort of a skill and it might harm them. That's some sort of an impression that quite a few people have. I want to understand from you better so that those fears are dispelled for them.
Okay, so the basic answer is can you hurt someone? I think on one level, you're asking me, are needles dangerous? And the answer is yes, of course. If you stick something in the body, then there's a chance that you might injure it. So your acupuncturist, the one you want to see, should be trained. And I believe in India, many of the acupuncturists are medical doctors, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're well trained in acupuncture. So I can't speak to regulation in India, but in the UK, for example, then there's a relatively good regulation about the standard of acupuncture. And if people are in, say, the British Acupuncture Council, then we can assume that they have a fairly good level of training in terms of knowing how to insert the needles, when to insert the needles, and what to do with the needles. So I think for your audience in India, then you're going to have to do some research. And I think word of mouth is also going to be very helpful when you're choosing an acupuncturist. So the answer is yes, of course. If someone doesn't sterilize needles, uses dirty needles, or inserts a needle too deep, then of course there are risks because it's a penetrating kind of therapy. However, there are all kinds of ways where you can treat without using needles. Needles are only one of the modalities available to acupuncturists. And in fact, the Chinese word for acupuncture is not acupuncture, it's needle and moxibustion. So, 针灸, which means literally needle and moxibustion, moxibustion is a technique where we burn a herb to warm up the skin. So when we translate that into English, we just say acupuncturist because it takes too long to say I'm an acupuncturist and moxibustion practitioner. So I just say I'm an acupuncturist. But within the real characters for acupuncturist in Chinese is acupuncture and moxa, acupuncture and moxibustion. So that's another way to treat the body. And in Japan, for example, there are people who are licensed only to do moxibustion, and they treat just warming the skin with this herb moxa. So I think acupuncture is a very broad kind of therapy, and needles are only one tool within the acupuncturist's arsenal, but they're the most famous tool, and those are the ones that we hear about the most.
Right, Oran. So what is it that acupuncture can do for the body? The good part means, how do we know that, okay, this is the thing that I should approach an acupuncturist for? It should be the first resort, or it should be the last resort after trying other medical avenues?
Yes, I think that acupuncture has a branding problem because we've all heard of osteopathy and chiropractic, and we think, oh, well, if I've got a back problem, I'll go and see an osteopath. So there's a very clear association between back pain and osteopathy. It's just that's what you think of. Or I'm feeling stressed, I'll go and see a masseur. But you don't know what you should go and see an acupuncturist for. And I think that that's the branding problem that acupuncturists have. So I'll try and answer it. Is that essentially acupuncture, because it's a regulating therapy, because its job is to trigger the body to cure itself, this is a therapy that can help many people with many different diseases. And these include stress-related diseases, insomnia, depression, anxiety, and also pain-related diseases. So acupuncture is very good for pain relief. So if you've got pain anywhere from top to bottom in your body, then acupuncture can be very helpful in those cases. So for example, headache or jaw pain or neck pain or shoulder pain, arthritis in the fingers, if I just go through the body, back pain, spine pain, hip pain, knee pain, and pain in the joints of the feet, then acupuncture is really a very useful resource for relieving or the pain, curing the disease, or improving quality of life.
Okay, Oran. So in terms of, how does it actually work? You talked about, that it can ignite something, it can pass on the message. So that is fine, that is understood. Now, how does it actually work for the body? If you pass on the message, what is it that has stopped, and that is what is it that it can ignite? Help us understand that part. And since it can cure so many things, especially on the pain part, different pain, how does it actually work? Means little bit of pain through the needle, and it can ignite what? I want to understand that for the audience.
That's going to be a very complicated answer, but I'll try and keep it simple. I think that the mechanisms of acupuncture are still not entirely understood. So within my circle of colleagues and understanding, I think there are two models to consider. And one are kind of scientific-based models, which are kind of endorphin-based. So inserting a needle can trigger the release of endorphins. But the model that I like to use most to explain things to myself, if not to other people, is the traditional one. It's what we call the qi paradigm. So qi is the Chinese word for energy or breath. And a lot of scientific-based doctors hearing this will go, oh, he's going to talk about energy. But you can just think about qi as being a signaling system in the body. So there are ways where the body signals to itself that things are going on. And we know that this part of this is the nervous system, and part of this is endorphins, and part of this is the hormonal system, hormonal regulation. So there are already signaling systems in the body that we are very aware of. But what we think is that the qi system or energetic system developed at a very early stage in embryo. And it's a signaling system where cells signal to each other. And we're not sure of that mechanism. But what you're doing with acupuncture is you're triggering this signaling system, and you're saying to, let's say you've got two people who both sprained their ankle. One person sprained it a week ago, and one person sprained it 9 months ago. And the person who sprained it a week ago is already feeling better, but the person who sprained it 9 months ago is not. So there's something that needs to be signaled to the body. It's like, come on. Why don't you get better? Why don't we try and bring the body's attention to the ankle and try and enable it to recover? So that's what we're doing with needles. And that means that we're not necessarily putting the needles in the ankle. We're actually maybe putting them on the wrist. So so there's a kind of mirroring in the body that sometimes if you think that the arm is reflective of the leg in some ways. There's a major bone here, and there's a major bone on your femur. There's a hinge joint here, and there's a hinge joint at the knee. There's two major bones here. There's two major bones on the leg. And then there's all these metacarpals and metatarsals here. There's all these metatarsals and toes and phalanges on the foot. So they're very much reflections of each other. So you can treat by treating the opposite. And this is an essential part of acupuncture thinking, is treating opposite surfaces to get a result. So targeting the body's energy or resources at that place.
Right, Oran. So can it ever happen that it can trigger the wrong sort of reaction in the body? Or is it always positive? Because we have stress hormones and so many other things in our body. And needles are not smart by themselves. It has to be the doctor that is smart. So can it go a different path than it is intended to?
Yes, I think anyone who tells you differently is not telling the truth. It's not a homeostatic mechanism. You're making an intervention in the body. So one of my teachers, the late Mr. Takai, who was the president of the Toyohari Association in Japan, and he was treating for 40 years. And he said, if I look back on the last 40 years of my practice, and I think of all the times when people came back to me and they were feeling worse after a treatment, I would say that 80% of the time came from over-treatment. In other words, he's saying, I didn't do the wrong thing. I did the right thing. I did the right points and I did the right stuff. But what I did is I just did too much of it. I just thought, oh, I better do some more. And oh, I better do some more. And I think I can definitely echo that from my own practice, is that usually when I get it wrong in a treatment, patients come back and they say, oh, you know what, after your treatment, I couldn't sleep that night. Or, you know what, it felt, it got a bit worse, and I felt really, really tired for a couple of days. Then I think, oh, I know what I did wrong. I just did too much. So the next time that patient comes, I make sure I do much less. And then usually that's more effective. So acupuncture is dose sensitive, just the same as, if a baby is teething, you don't give them 4 paracetamol. Of course not. You give them a quarter of a paracetamol. But if you've got jaw pain, if you've got toothache, I'll give you 2 paracetamol. So acupuncture is very, very dose sensitive, and you have to be skillful to get the right dose for your patients. So I'm saying that, your acupuncturist needs to be good at what they do, and they need to be trained in what they do, and they need to have this awareness. So yes, it is possible that you may feel worse after a treatment. But I'll say one more thing, which is there's a concept in Japanese acupuncture called mengen. And mengen essentially can be translated as healing crisis. And healing crisis after treatment, by definition, lasts less than 24 hours. So the patient says, you know what, my knee got really bad after I saw you, and I went to bed, it was really painful, but the next day I woke up and it felt much better. That's called healing crisis. You know what, I felt so exhausted after I saw you, I went back home and I just slept and slept, I couldn't get up. That's mengen, that's healing crisis. But the next day they feel better, then that's healing crisis. So any kind of aggravation that lasts for around 24 hours is the body's way of kind of blowing itself out and recovering. But anything that kind of lasts for the whole week usually leads to over treatment, and occasionally will be wrong treatment.
Right, Oran. So, are you able to hear me? Yeah, Oran. So I lost you for a moment in terms of the visual feed, but I wanted to ensure that you are very much back. So, Oran, I want to understand about this thing. What is the right dose then? Means I do one session today, and then when is the next session? How do you decide what is the right amount of dose or how amount of sessions for an individual patient? Yes, Oran. Is my audio reaching you? I see some please.
You're asking me about
Yeah.
frequency of treatment. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now I've got sound again. You were hanging for a second. Okay. So how often does someone need to come for acupuncture? That's a really good question. And I think it really depends on the patient and the severity of the disease. So sometimes I will have patients who come along and they are in such pain, like they've got shingles or back pain, then I'll just say, come back tomorrow. And I'll see them daily until they get an improvement, until they're good enough. But mostly you can say to people, come back in a week's time. Sometimes you can say, come back in 2 weeks' time. So it really depends, first of all, on the severity of their symptoms, because if they're in terrible discomfort, then you want to help. Secondly, it depends on their accessibility, because some people simply can't come the next day. They can't come in 2 days' time, and you need to work with them with their spacing. But I would say that usually coming weekly is, for most things, is a good interval. And then sometimes you can come fortnightly. And then what happens as a general thing, as over a period of time, as you're treating someone, is you start to say to them to come at longer and longer intervals. And they stay well for longer and longer intervals. So, for example, you say, okay, I would like to see you in a month's time. And they say, you know what, I felt good until 3.5 weeks, and then it started to come back a bit. Then you say, okay, then we'll just come every 3 weeks for another couple of sessions, and then after that we'll stretch it out to a month or 2 months.
Right, Oran. Now, are there patients for whom acupuncture is not for? Who is it not for in terms of using acupuncture on them?
I don't think that I would say there are. I mean, there are every acupuncturist, and I've been working 36 years, 37 years. So there are always failures, patients for whom it didn't work. and I can look back on those people and say, were there any signs? Is there a kind of person for whom it's not going to work? And I think there are some people who are more difficult to treat than others. And those people tend to be people with a very long and complex history who are already very old. And then I wouldn't say that acupuncture doesn't work for them, but I would say that it works much more slowly. And, when I treat someone who's 90 or 95, then I need, of course, I'm not going to cure them of the kind of things they've accumulated over their lifestyle, over their lifetime. But what we are going to do is see that there may be very slow improvements in the things that they come for. So that's one category of patients for whom I would say acupuncture is kind of doesn't get instant results for. There's another kind of patient, and sometimes they're I see them as doubting Thomases, where they come in and they expect you to fix everything in one session, and they're very disbelieving of anything that you do, and then they don't come back the next week. So if you're coming with that kind of mindset, then it's very hard to get success, because it takes time. Like cooking a nice meal takes time, doesn't it? You have to get the ingredients, you have to put them in a pan, and you have to cook them for a while. And it's the same with acupuncture. You can't get everything right in one session. It takes time, and you need to give that acupuncturist some time to really get momentum. I think acupuncture is like rowing a boat. When you get in the boat and you get the oars and you start to take the first pull on the oars, then there's a bit of splashing and there's not much movement. But the second one, there's a little bit more movement. The third one, there's some momentum. So what we need to do is build up healing momentum with people. And if they give us a chance, then that can be very effective. But sometimes patients don't give us a chance. They just want a miracle on the first session.
Absolutely. Now, in many systems of medicine, especially modern system of medicine, there's something called the preventive cure. Does acupuncture also work in terms of preventing you from having any sort of a illness in the future? How does that work?
Yes, I think that's true. It's very hard to research, isn't it? Because you can't say we gave acupuncture to 50 people and some of them didn't, and we didn't give acupuncture to 50 people and some got sick and some didn't. So that's not something anyone's going to research. But certainly it's within the thinking of acupuncture is that there are treatments that you do at the change of season in order to prevent people getting sick. So basically, the change of season is seen as a time of turbulence or change when disease can enter from the outside of the body into the inside. So that's certainly something that is part of the acupuncture canon, but much more so, it's part of the moxibustion canon. So this idea of burning herbs, there's one point just below the knee called Susanli or stomach 36. And this point is very, very famous in the literature for increasing longevity and also for preventing disease, for preventing external disease in particular, things like colds and flus and things that kind of, viral infections, I guess. So we use moxa on this point at the change of season, and that's very much thought of as a preventative treatment.
Right. There is much to learn from you, Oran, and I'm sure not just this episode, but a lot of teaching that you do, and also your 5 books on this. Means you are the author of 5 books on acupuncture and moxibustion. So what can people learn from those books? Who are those books for?
Right, those books are primarily for practitioners of Chinese medicine or body work. So I've written a lot about moxibustion and Japanese moxibustion in particular, and a very simple method of applying moxibustion using a piece of bamboo. So that's really what I'm very well known in the field for, is this work with a technique called on take. On means warm and take means bamboo, so warm bamboo. So I teach this worldwide and I write books about it as well. So if you're a body worker, if you do massage, if you do reflexology, or if you do acupuncture in particular, I don't know how many acupuncturists are listening to your show, then these books would be of interest to you. I don't think they'd be of interest to the general reader. I think they're more specific, tailored at practitioners.
Absolutely, absolutely. Maybe not many acupuncturists now, but they will be certainly getting interested into this particular field because it alleviates a lot of pain, and pain is what people are looking solution for, especially in today's time. As I said, there is so much to learn from, and I'm sure a lot of people would like to learn about you, from you, and also from your books, and also engage with you professionally as an acupuncturist. So, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
Well, what I do is I do a lot of online coaching, mostly for practitioners. So practitioners, I don't mean just acupuncturists, but people who are working with patients in any field. And I do a lot of online coaching. And I also do habit coaching. So habit coaching, basically helping people get healthier habits so they can achieve what they really want to achieve. So you can, of course, reach me through my website. And I think you're going to put those details into the links. Or you can just search my name and you'll find my website. And so if I do online coaching as well. So thank you for that.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much indeed, AJ. And thank you all for watching and listening.